Now, NASA's Artemis spacecraft has arrived at the moon after launching last Wednesday. It is the most powerful rocket that NASA has ever built. This particular journey is unmanned, but it's part of a program which aims to get humans on the moon once again. Well, let's discuss the program, what it's all about, what it might achieve. I'm pleased to say that joining me is Leroy Chiao, who is a former NASA astronaut and commander on the International Space Station. Really lovely to have you with us, sir, here on BBC News. Thank you so much. Explain to us mere mortals who don't have your understanding of these things what this project is all about, why it's so important.
Sure. Well, this is the first test flight of the both the Space Launch System rocket and the full-up test of the Orion spacecraft. And these are the instruments that would be used by NASA to return humans eventually to the surface of the moon, hopefully in a sustainable manner. So the launch was just a few days ago. As you know, it looked like it was flawless. And the Orion spacecraft so far looks like it's performing flawlessly as well. Just very recently, just several hours ago, reached what we call a perigee to the moon, which is the lowest point of an orbit, at around 80 miles or so, or just a little over 120 kilometers. And now it's going to execute a burn, and now it's going to swing much, much farther away in the tens of thousands of miles. And it's going to go into what's called a distant orbit. And this is all intended to shake down the Orion spacecraft and put it through its paces, have it check out all its systems, make sure it's going to work. And then at the end of the 25-day mission, it's going to come back to Earth and re-enter the atmosphere. Big test of the heat shield. Coming back from the moon is going a lot faster than coming back from the space station. Only about 25,000 kilometers an hour from the space station, and about 50% more than that coming back from the moon. So the speeds are much greater, energy is much greater. And if the hardware works out, then hopefully Artemis 2 in the next year or couple of years will launch with humans on board for the first orbital flight around the moon since 1968, or actually that's not true, since 1971, or no, 69, 70. Anyway, if that works out, then that sets the stage for landing humans back on the moon. So hopefully that will come about.
Okay. So, and now, and as we say, no human beings on board this, but there are mannequins with sensors attached to them. And I'm assuming that's about sending back data and information. How much of that is about working out? I mean, you've mentioned some of the risks there, but how much of it is working out the impact on humans? Tell us more about that.
Sure. Certainly, when you travel into space, even to the space station, you're exposed to higher levels of radiation than you would be here. There are many other biomedical effects that happen as a result of being in the zero-G or microgravity environment. A lot of different changes to the human body and living systems. None of them are good. And so we try to mitigate those effects through exercise and other countermeasures. And so the mannequins on board the Orion, they are instrumented. They'll measure things like the radiation environment to see what humans would have been exposed to on a mission like this. And that will add to the database of knowledge that we have on, these kinds of risks. So, a lot of different instrumentation, including the mannequins on board the spacecraft. And so far, it looks like it's going very well.
Okay. I mean, actually, it's really interesting, some of the things you mentioned there. This is a little bit off topic, but it makes me wonder. We introduce you as a former NASA astronaut, and you've outlined some of the risks there. Once you're sort of back in civilian life, as it were, do you have to constantly monitor your health? Do you have to live differently because of all those experiences, because of what your body's been through? I mean, do people follow you and your progress? How does that work?
There's a voluntary program with NASA. So NASA will bring us back yearly and do a physical exam and, take some measurements. And, they track the long-term study of astronaut health to see if there are any long-term deleterious effects. An obvious one might be cancer. There's not enough data yet to draw a conclusion on that. We're relatively still protected here in low Earth orbit aboard the space station, or in the past aboard a space shuttle. And so really, although we've been exposed to higher levels of radiation, so far it doesn't really look like it's really affected long-term health. So I don't have to personally do anything differently. But you may remember several years ago, we started seeing astronauts coming back with changes to their vision. And that is still going on. We are still having that and studying that and trying to figure out what we can do to either prevent it or identify what characteristics make some people susceptible to it and others not.
Gosh, I mean, that is all fascinating. I mean, there's so much to talk to you about. Just a quick final thought, and forgive me, I'm sure people ask you this all the time, but in terms of this project that we brought you on to talk about, the idea that ultimately this will get humans back to the moon again, for you, what is the fundamental point of that? Is there scientific learning that is a benefit from that? Or do you think there is an element of just, you know, the geopolitics and wanting to be another nation to get people and more women up to the moon in particular and so on? What's going on there for you?
Sure, it's all those things wrapped up. Of course, about politics, we would never have even had a space program. We would have never had a first moon race and space race to get to the moon. And frankly, we wouldn't have this program now. So, of course, the national prestige angle and, of course, inspiring the next generation of young people, that's all wrapped up into it. But there are very much scientific reasons for going back and exploring the moon. One of them, it's a little bit out there, but the helium-3 is a potential fusion fuel source on the moon. Also, there are practical, or what I call operational, reasons for going back. If you're going to send a crew to Mars, it makes sense to practice on the moon, to train your astronauts, to develop and test your hardware, make sure it's all really going to work before you send it all the way to Mars, because it takes about 6 months one way to go to Mars when the planets are lined up. And the reason you do all this on the moon is close by. It's only 3 to 4 days. If there's an incident, you can get your crew back pretty quickly.
Oh, fascinating to talk to you. And I love the language you use. The moon is close by. Thank you very much. We'll talk again, I hope. Thank you very much. That's Leroy Chiao, who is a former NASA astronaut, as you will have gathered, talking there about that Artemis